Commander Eli Vance had never expected to die alone in the cold, dark silence of deep space, but everything had gone wrong in a blink. His squadron was on routine patrol near the Forbidden Zone, a part of space full of broken ships, lost signals, and old warnings. Most called it cursed. They were ambushed without warning by the Korath, a brutal alien race known for striking fast and leaving nothing alive. The Frontier Ray, Eli's ship, took a direct hit to its engines, and the systems failed one after another. His friends' voices on comms vanished one by one as their ships exploded around him. With smoke filling the cockpit and alarms screaming, Eli had only one choice. He pulled the ejection lever. The escape pod burst free as his ship turned into fire and metal behind him. Now he was floating alone, surrounded by wreckage and death. The pod was damaged, oxygen leaking, power fading. He stared at the stars, his body growing cold, knowing no one would come. The Forbidden Zone was marked as no entry by the Terran command. Even the Korath didn't stay long. He was as good as dead. Minutes passed, and something strange happened. A soft, glowing light appeared outside the pod. Not a flare, not a weapon. It was a ship, curved, sleek, glowing with violet lines across its hull. It didn't move like a normal craft. It drifted like it was alive. Eli stared, unsure if he was hallucinating. The ship hovered close, silently scanning the pod. Then a voice echoed in his ears through the broken comscom. Melodic, not human. Human, it said. You are not theirs. You are mine now. The words didn't make sense. He tried to speak, but blacked out. His last thought was a mix of confusion and fear. Was this death? Or something stranger? When he woke, the stars were gone. He lay on a bed made of soft vines that glowed faintly. Above him, the ceiling sparkled like a cave full of crystals. The walls pulsed with soft light. Everything was alive, moving gently like it breathed. Eli sat up, his muscles sore, but his wounds gone. His body had been healed. That's when he saw her. A tall woman stood near him, alien, yet almost human. In shape, her skin was smooth silver, her hair like flowing metal, her eyes glowed like twin moons. She wore armor marked with moving symbols that shifted slowly, alive with energy. She looked strong and calm, a mix of beauty and danger. Eli tried to speak, but she stepped forward and placed a hand on his chest. You will not die, she said. You belong to me. His mind reeled. What do you mean I belong to you? She tilted her head slightly, as if surprised by the question. I saved you. It is the law of bond. You are mine. Eli blinked. I'm not some trophy. I didn't agree to this. She remained still. You fell into the stars. I caught you. The bond is sealed. He demanded answers. She introduced herself as Kylara, a warrior of the Narration, a species unknown to human records. They had remained hidden, watchers from the deep reaches of space. But something had changed. She claimed the universe was shifting. The balance was breaking, and she had chosen to act. Why she saved Eli? She wouldn't fully explain. It was more than just duty. She said she felt something in him when she found him, a spark, a fire not seen in most.
I'll buy her people's laws.
That act of rescue marked a bond. In the eyes of the Narration, she had chosen him as her mate. The word echoed in his ears. Mate. He barely knew her, didn't understand her culture or her world, and yet she stood over him, claiming him not just as a partner, but as something sacred. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't playing. Dead serious. Eli tried to argue, but it didn't matter. Her people accepted it. The bond had been witnessed. He was no longer just a stranded pilot. He was something more. Whether he liked it or not, his life had changed. He wasn't alone anymore, but what lay ahead, he couldn't yet imagine. All he knew was this. He had been lost. And now, an alien woman had declared him hers. Eli tried to make sense of everything, but nothing felt real. The room around him pulsed with soft light, as if the walls were alive. The air was warm, filled with the scent of flowers he didn't recognize. Kylara stood near him, calm and watchful, her silver skin glowing faintly. Her armor seemed to shift like it was breathing. She studied him, not like a threat, but like someone trying to understand something precious and strange. Eli asked questions. Where was he? Who were her people? Why had she saved him? But Kylara didn't answer right away. She only said, "You are safe. You are mine now." I didn't like that word, mine. It sounded like ownership. She said it as if it was more than that. To her, it was a bond, a choice made with purpose. She led him through winding halls of crystal and light, where tall beings watched him with glowing eyes, whispering in their own language. Wherever they walked, others bowed their heads slightly, not to Eli, but to her. He realized then how important she must be. Kylara was not just a warrior. She was something more respected, maybe even feared. She brought him to a high platform that overlooked a vast garden under a glass dome. Strange trees twisted upward, their leaves glowing like stars. Creatures flew between branches, singing soft songs. It was beautiful, but it felt like a dream Eli couldn't wake from. "Why me?" he finally asked. "You don't even know who I am." Kylara turned to face him. "I saw you when you drifted near death. I watched your mind, your spirit. You burned with fire, even as your body failed. Many would beg. You did not. You faced the void." He shook his head. "That doesn't mean but she stopped him. Do not understand. To save a life in the Forbidden Zone is to accept fate. It is our law. You were claimed by death. I took you from it. The bond is sacred." Eli felt trapped. But not in chains. It was something heavier. A culture. A belief. A ritual he didn't agree to, but was now a part of. Kylara seemed calm about it. Certain, like she had already chosen long ago. Her people believed in strength, in fate, in fire. And somehow, she had seen all that in him. Eli didn't know how to argue with a species he barely understood, but he tried. "Where I come from, we don't choose like this. We talk. We learn about each other." She nodded. "That will come. But know this. I do not bind myself to weakness. I choose what I see as worthy. You are more than you think, Eli Vance." Her voice was soft now. Not cold, not commanding. She was being honest. In her own way, this wasn't about control. It was about connection. Still, Eli felt out of place. A soldier, a lost pilot, now suddenly bonded to an alien war leader before an entire empire. Looked around, wondering if he could escape, but even that thought felt wrong. She had saved his life, healed his wounds, and declared him her mate before her people. There was no going back. Later, he was brought to a chamber where hundreds of Narration had gathered. Warriors in living armor, scholars with glowing scrolls, elders whose eyes shimmered like galaxies. Kylara stood tall beside him and raised her hand. "This human," she said in their strange language, "was taken from death's hand. He is mine by bond and by right. Let it be known." The crowd bowed. Eli felt a wave of heat run through him. It was real. All of it. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was now a part of something vast and ancient. After the ceremony, Kylara brought him back to her private chamber. She sat beside him and asked, "Are you afraid?" He looked into her strange, shining eyes. "I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm not afraid of you." She placed a hand gently on his chest. "Good, because the galaxy is changing, and you will see why I chose you soon enough." Eli didn't answer. He stared out at the stars beyond the glass walls. A part of him still wanted to run, but another part, a small growing part, wanted to stay and find out what all this truly meant. The peace Eli had found in Kylara's strange world did not last long. Only days after the ceremony, a dark message reached them. Earth was in danger. The Korath had broken through the last line of defense, smashing through the Terran border. Near Gamma Station, they had burned through several colonies already, leaving behind nothing but ash and silence. Humanity's last hope, the defense grid around Earth, was failing fast. Worse, the Galactic Council had turned its back on humans. They called the war a human mistake. They said Earth was not their concern. The Council declared neutrality. While millions of lives hung in the balance, Eli felt a fire build inside him. Rage, fear, and helplessness mixed together. He looked to Kylara, unsure of what she would say. She met his gaze with cold fury in her eyes. Your people are not alone, not anymore. She led him to her war chamber, a place hidden deep within her world's core. The room hummed with power, alive with symbols and maps floating in the air. At the center stood a crystal command table. Kailara touched it, and ancient ships rose into view-curved vessels of the Narration, long hidden, long silent. She had summoned them from deep vaults, ships of her ancestors, war machines made of living matter and burning energy. The Narration elders appeared through glowing projections, their faces tight with worry and disapproval. This is not our war, one said. Cannot risk everything for outsiders. Kailara stood firm. Then I will go without your blessing. The elders warned her of exile. She didn't flinch. Her voice rang out, sharp and proud. Have chosen the bond was not a mistake. This war matters. That world matters. And so does the fire within that man. Eli didn't know what to say. He had never asked her to fight for Earth, never wanted her to put her people in danger. Kailara had already decided. She turned to him. You led warriors. You know war. Then lead again. He looked at the fleet. She was offering him 3 living cruisers that shifted like sea creatures, 2 pulse carriers that glowed with stormlight, and her own personal ship, the Velensai, a massive flagship that breathed like a dragon. She had given him command of a force no human had ever dreamed of, and she would fly beside him, his hands clenched into fists. He was just a pilot, once lost and broken. But now he had a fleet, an alien war queen at his side, and a home that needed saving. He nodded. Let's bring the fire back to them. The fleet jumped through the stars, streaks of light cutting across the void. Eli stood on the bridge of the Velensai, surrounded by Narration officers who followed his orders without question. They moved like a pack, swift and silent, hunting their prey. Their first target was Orion's graveyard, a Korath stronghold, built from old human ruins. Below, human colonies cried out for help, under siege from the enemy. The fleet attacked. Eli mixed human tactics with Narration precision. The ships struck like shadows, then vanished. Kailara danced through battle. With elegance and fury, her blades slicing through enemy hulls and boarding raids. Together, they brought down warships twice their size. Then came the Korath flagship Bloodhowl, a massive monster of steel and bone, old as war itself. It fell into orbit like a hammer, its dark cannons charging. Eli's fleet couldn't match its power directly. So he called a move only humans would try. Bait the beast, split the formation, blind its sensors with unreal light flares, and strike the exposed core. It was risky. It was insane. But it worked. Kailara's ship led the final charge, piercing the flagship's heart. The Bloodhowl exploded in a blast of fire that lit the entire battlefield. The human colonies were safe. The mission was a victory. But Kailara was wounded in the fight, her armor broken, blood glowing silver across her side. She collapsed into Eli's arms as the battle ended. The fire that had started burning inside Eli grew stronger. The war wasn't over. Earth still burned. But now the enemy would learn something new. Humanity did not fall alone. It had allies now powerful, ancient, and angry. And leading them was a human who had once drifted near death, now returned with a fleet that made stars tremble. After the victory at Orion's graveyard, Eli had no time to rest. The colony was saved, but Earth was still under siege, and the clock was ticking. Every report from the front lines told the same story. Korath fleets were growing bolder, striking deeper into human space. Refugee ships filled with scared voices begged for help, and Earth's defenses were collapsing under constant attack. While the wounded were treated and the damaged ships were repaired, Eli stood beside Kailara in the war chamber, watching the galaxy's burning edges spread toward his home. She was hurt, her side wrapped in glowing medical wraps. Her breath slower than usual, but her eyes were just as fierce. We must move fast, she said. They will not wait. The fleet prepared to jump again. Eli gave orders with confidence, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The army and officers now looked at him with respect, even pride. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was a commander. The strange ships responded to his commands like extensions of his will. Kylara stood with him at every step, even through the pain. She moved slowly, but refused to rest. The next battle would be the hardest. Earth's orbit had become a battlefield filled with smoke and wreckage. 10 Korath Horde fleets surrounded the planet. Human ships were outnumbered and outgunned, fighting to delay the inevitable. The Galactic Council had sent no help, only silence. They had already buried humanity in their minds. But the Narration had come. When Eli's fleet arrived above Earth, a storm of fire welcomed them. Laser beams, dark plasma blasts, and debris flew in every direction. He opened a direct channel to every human force still fighting. His voice carried across the chaos. Is Commander Eli Vance. We are not alone. Reen ships fight beside us. Push now, push hard. Earth will not fall. His words lit a spark. Across the burning sky, broken Terran ships reformed their lines and joined the charge. On the Reen channels, Kylara's voice followed, strong despite her wounds. This is the fire I chose. This is the fury I trust. Stand with them. Burn the enemy back to the void. The space around Earth turned into a storm of death. Human missiles slammed into Korath dreadnoughts. Rent pulse beams sliced through armor. The Valensai tore through enemy lines like a beast uncaged. Eli stood at the front, commanding the assault, sending orders faster than any computer. The human fleets used chaos as a weapon, something the Korath didn't expect. They hit, hard, scattered, regrouped, struck again. Allah joined a boarding raid on a massive enemy carrier. Life followed her into the belly of the beast. Inside, they fought side by side. She moved like lightning, her twin blades cutting through monstrous Korath soldiers. Eli fired burst after burst from his rifle, protecting her flank. At one moment, Kylara pushed him out of the way and took 3 deep cuts meant for him. Her armor cracked, blood flowing, but she kept fighting. They reached the ship's bridge and destroyed its controls, sending it crashing into its own fleet. They escaped just before it exploded. Back on the Valensai, Kylara collapsed, pale but smiling faintly. You lead like fire, she whispered. They will not forget this day. Eli took her hand and looked at Earth below, still standing, still fighting. It wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned. Human ships, once broken, now soared with pride. The Korath forces began to retreat, shaken by the strength they had never expected. Eli knew they had done more than just win a battle. They had lit a fire across the stars. A fire made of courage, unity, and fury. And the galaxy had started to notice. After the battle that saved Earth, silence fell across the warship Valensai. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence that follows pain. Kylara lay on a resting platform, her silver blood slowly healing inside her body. The cuts she took while protecting Eli had gone deep, and though her alien body was strong, she was weaker now. She refused to sleep, refused to rest fully, only lying there with one eye open, watching him, as if waiting to see what he would do next. Eli stayed beside her, unsure of what words to say. She had taken the wounds meant for him. He had seen. People do brave things in war, but this was different. This wasn't just duty. She had chosen to stand in front of him, to risk everything not as a soldier, but as someone who believed in him. It made something shift in his heart. First time, he looked at her not just as an alien warrior, but as someone truly close to him. He remembered her saying, "You are mine," and now he understood. Not in a way that meant control or power, but in the way someone says, "You are worth protecting." That bond, once strange, now felt real. The other Narration watched quietly. Some had doubted her choice to save a human. Some had whispered behind her back. But now, those whispers had turned into respect. They had seen Eli lead their fleet. They had seen their war mistress bleed for him. The bond was no longer seen as strange. It had become a symbol, not just of connection, but of change. The message. had started to spread beyond the ship. Green communication webs lit up across the stars. Ships that had remained hidden for centuries began to stir. Warriors who had stayed silent during the war now spoke out. The name of Eli Vance was being said across star systems not just as a survivor, but as a chosen one, a leader, a mate of fire. Kylara's bold decision had awakened something inside her people. For years they had stayed away from the galaxies. Wars, keeping to themselves. But now, one human, brought into their world by fate, had reminded them what they once were: defenders, fighters, fireborn. The bond had become more than a personal choice. It had become a light others followed. Still, Earth was not yet safe. The Korath were regrouping, preparing for another assault. Though they had lost the battle, they had not given up. Eli knew they would return with even greater force. This time, humanity wouldn't be standing alone. Messages came from deep space. Arn captains pledged their fleets to Eli's command. Elders who had once warned Kylara to stay out of the war now sent words of support. One message simply said, "The flame you lit now burns in us all." Lee stood on the command. Deccan looked over the stars. So much had changed in such a short time. He had gone from a lost pilot floating in space to the center of something far greater. He didn't fully understand it, but he no longer felt fear. He looked back at Kylara. She had pushed past her limits, had fought for a people not her own, and had given him everything. Not just weapons, not just power, but belief. She saw something in him, and now others did too. That night, as the ship glided quietly above Earth's orbit, Eli sat beside her and spoke softly. "Why me?" he asked. "Why not anyone else?" She opened her eyes slowly, her voice weak but clear. "Because you didn't beg for life. You didn't fear death. You didn't break, even when alone. You are not just a human. You are the flame that fights back when the galaxy grows dark. And I am drawn to fire." He said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The war was still coming. But now he knew where he stood. He wasn't just a survivor. He was the spark that lit a fire strong enough to change everything. And with Kylara by his side, nothing could stop what was coming next. The final battle began with the sky over Earth turning blood red, filled with enemy ships that blotted out the stars. The Korath had returned, this time with 10 full horde fleets, larger and more brutal than before. Their command ships were twice the size of any Earth vessel, covered in dark armor and spitting waves of plasma fire into the atmosphere. Cities below burned, their defenses breaking apart. People screamed into radios, begging for help. Earth was on the edge of destruction. Human fleets tried to hold the line, but they were scattered and weak. There was no chance of winning alone. But this time, they weren't alone. From deep space came the roar of engines, not human, but alive with violet light. The Enrened arrived. Dozens of ships, elegant, glowing, sharp like blades, peered from the void, forming up around Earth like a shield of fire. At the front flew the massive warship Valensai, its hull shining like a storm about to break. Eli stood at the bridge, his voice calm but full of purpose. "This is for Earth," he said. "This is for every soul they burned. We strike now." His words were broadcast to every human and Reen ship in orbit. On the other side of the command deck, Kylara stood with him, her wounds wrapped in golden cloth. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned like twin stars. "Let the Korath see," she said. "Let them learn fear." The battle began like a storm unleashed. Human fighters raced through enemy lines, drawing fire away from the larger ships. Rhine cruisers dove like falcons, cutting through metal and bone. The Korath returned fire, dark plasma beams tearing through space, smashing entire squadrons in seconds. But the joint fleet did not break. They fought harder. Eli led the attacks, calling out targets, changing tactics mid-battle, using tricks. The Korath didn't expect. He used Earth's broken satellites as traps, turning debris fields into weapons. Arrain pilots followed his commands without hesitation. Kylara joined the fight, leading a strike team onto one of the Korath dreadnoughts. Eli went with her, not as a commander, but as a fighter. Together, they boarded the beast of a ship, pushing through corridors filled with smoke and acid rain. Korath soldiers waited in the dark, tall and armored. But Kylara fought like a flame set loose, blades moving too fast to follow. Eli backed her up with rifle fire, guarding her flank as they moved deeper. The air was thick with heat and blood. Every hallway was a war zone. They reached the bridge of the dreadnought, where the Korath warlord waited. He was massive, covered in scars, with metal fused into his skin. He roared, charging at Kylara. She met him head-on, and the sound of their blades shook the walls. Eli tried to join the fight, but one of the Korath soldiers grabbed him, slamming him into the wall. Pain exploded through his body. Kylara saw it and screamed, her voice cutting like thunder. She struck the warlord again and again, even as he slashed into her side. Finally, she drove both blades into his chest, twisting them as he fell. The bridge exploded in sparks. Eli pulled himself up, blood on his face, and grabbed Kylara as the ship shook beneath them. They ran through fire and falling steel, reaching their escape shuttle just as the dreadnought tore itself apart behind them. They crashed into orbit, flames trailing behind them, but the Naian ships moved to protect them. The last of the Korath forces began to retreat, broken and scattered. The joint fleet had won. Earth had survived. The battlefield was silent. Now, filled with wreckage and drifting ships, but the humans and Rhine stood together. Cheers filled the radios. On every screen, people saw the image of Kylara and Eli stepping out of the escape shuttle, bruised and bloodied, but alive. Together, Earth was safe. The war had not ended yet, but the worst of it had passed. And now, the galaxy knew that humanity was not alone and never would be again. Eli had become more than a survivor. It was a symbol of unity, of strength, of fire that could not be put out. And beside him stood the War Mistress, who had once called him hers not because of duty, but because of something deeper, something real. Together, they had changed the stars. When the battle was over and the last piece of the Hive Crusher burned in the sky, a deep silence fell over Varelia. Not one of fear, but a peace, of survival, of pride. The people who once lived only in the safety of crystal towers and glowing forests now stood shoulder to shoulder with human soldiers, their armor dented, their eyes full of fire. They had fought for their world and won. The Galar were gone, broken and scattered, and for the first time in a long time, the stars felt safe again. Elias walked through the main plaza of the capital, surrounded by both species, nodding to warriors who had followed him into fire. Some saluted, some placed hands over their hearts, and others simply smiled. He wasn't just the human who saved a girl anymore. He was the man who helped save an entire race. The High Council called a gathering under the twin moons, where a ceremony would be held. Crystal lights floated above the crowd as thousands gathered in a great circle, surrounding a raised platform carved from glowing stone. Elias stood beside Salaray, who wore a battle cloak made from the banner of her house torn during the fight, now stitched with both Terran and Varelian colors. As the council elders spoke of victory, of sacrifice, and of unity, Celery stepped forward and raised her voice so all could hear. She told the story of her rescue, of how a stranger had pulled her from death, not knowing who she was or what it would mean. She spoke of how he stood beside her, taught her people to fight, and led them through darkness. Then she turned to Elias, took his hand, and looked him in the eye. "He is not just my protector," she said. "He is not just my mate by right. He is the bridge between our worlds, the heart of our hope." The crowd responded with cheers that shook the very stones. Lights rose into the air, songs echoed across the hills, and in that moment, Elias felt something powerful. Not just pride, but belonging. He had come from Earth, from a place where he never expected much more than orders and battles. Now, he stood on an alien world where he was more than a captain. He was family. After the ceremony, as the moons lit the sky, Elias and Salari sat on a balcony overlooking the valley where the final battle had taken place. Fires flickered in the distance, as people celebrated below. Salary leaned against him, her voice soft. "You gave us more than strength," she whispered. "You gave us a reason to rise." Elias smiled and looked up at the stars. The war was over, but something bigger had begun, a bond between two peoples, sealed not by power, but by trust, courage, and love. He didn't know what came next, but he knew, whatever it was, they would face it together. And this time, he wasn't alone.